Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 202, titled When It Feels Like Slow Motion. What would it mean for us to choose rest in our grief work? To admit that we need to slow down in our hurried pace of life and let ourselves just be? This week, we are resetting the clock and starting over on our grief work and expectations. Our experience may not be as quick as we'd like, but it will be ours, and that is more hopeful than you might think. Grief itself can come on fast, but grieving is not a fast process. It is a lifelong engagement, an ongoing act of permission to honor and validate the intensity. Allowing moments of grace for ourselves through grief is the crucial act of kindness we need to survive the overwhelming need to move forward. I think we assume moving forward is the only way to, quote, feel better or enjoy life again. And indeed, we will eventually move forward. But without first reading the map, a road trip of such magnitude will result in missed turns and flat tires. And we, the grievers, do not need to suffer additional indignities simply for the sake of healing. Quite the opposite. Our minds will allow us to heal in tangible, experiential ways if we can embrace the humble, steady pace of one thing at a time. Early in the grief process, and I mean in the first 2 weeks typically, it seems like we as people have a little more grace for ourselves and the support that we need. We are less afraid to ask for help and more open to the reality that things are going to be tough and uncomfortable for a little while. But what about when those 2 weeks come to an end? I think this is often where people wonder what steps and actions they can take to hurry the process along. The messy little moments of grief that pop up after the initial weeks are hard to accept, and yet accepting them is exactly what we need to do before we can move into anything bigger. Focusing on the small things we can handle restores our sense of control and involvement over our own lives. In these early days of loss, we might even be experiencing an ongoing expression of denial over the impact this loss has in our lives. But if we are not mindful, we vilify denial instead of admitting it is a normal and expected part of our reality. See, denial allows us to pace ourselves, to daydream, and protects our heart against the shame of slower movement through life. Sometimes our pace is so slow even that it might feel like reverse. But what feels like reverse might just be standing still. I personally struggle with stillness, but as I mentally and physically practice being still, I am learning patience with myself as I process at my own pace. Every single time I learn of another life lost, another home burned, another illness diagnosed, I experience what I've come to name as the Great Slowdown. In the Great Slowdown, light moves faster, while minutes seem trapped in molasses. Simple decisions, like what to eat next, can feel weighty. Even my next breath often takes more energy than I can muster. But in this pacing, my own body is asking for and giving me permission to wait, to pause, to be still, and to resist the litany of decision-making, of criticisms, and damaging thought processes our culture tends to rely upon during grief. And we can access this slow, intentional way of living no matter where we find ourselves in the process. Because grief is not a problem to solve or a box we can simply close and give away. It is a lifelong experience, one we all face, whether we like it or not. So when we come to accept that our experience needs pacing, needs more slow, intentional methods, where does the shame of staying in this place come from? Why do we have the impression we must hurry, speed up, become super available, and hustle again? Here we could go into a long and exhausting discussion about hustle culture, capitalism, productivity, and the needs of everyone else who rely upon us. But that's too much for the slow moment we want to experience. Instead, let's name the unending questions from well-intentioned outsiders to our grief. I think the curiosity of strangers can cultivate shame. Though they usually mean well, leading questions make us internalize and should all over our own decisions. Questions like, so when will you go back to work? And haven't you gotten some help yet? It's been a few months. One of the personally shaming questions I heard often around fertility and pregnancy loss was this: well, are you guys going to try again? These questions come from a cultural discomfort with suffering and a need to fix the broken situation. It is hard to believe someone might choose to rest and be still over productivity and trying to move on, right? But rather than bandaging it up early, imagine what would happen if your wound had a chance to breathe. If the pausing and avoidance of questions like these was just a natural response to your own needs and loss. I think if you allowed yourself to slow down, you would begin to notice what those efforts to fix you sound like. I think your awareness would grow, allowing you to identify the shame as it is offered in question form and respond with compassion for yourself and the person unaware of what they're asking. In the meantime, if you're not sure what the fixing sounds like, bring your attention to those around you who offer platitudes of cheer and stories of their own grieving work. When you are so used to hearing this kind of catch the hope story, it's hard to notice when it doesn't feel good. These kind of comments can feed the narrative of moving on with expectations that you have no obligation to carry. It's completely okay to appreciate someone else's story of hope and to not be able to internalize it for yourself. Yet from those interactions, we should ourselves with their stories, believing our denial and sorrow do not deserve the space to move slowly or to simply exist and stand still. I want to leave you today with an invitation to remain with yourself through any grief you experience for as long as you need. You don't have to keep up with anyone but yourself. If you can hold yourself to your own standard, your own expectations, your own values, and your own hopes, you will create space in your inner world that becomes a gift in grief, both for you and the people you will see face to face. Thank you for listening to episode 202 of Restorative Grief. In grief, it is not your job to brighten another person's day, lest you unintentionally stomp on their sorrow. If you're not sure how to hold space without fixing, try saying, "Hey, this sucks. I love you. I'm sorry, and I'm with you." And these are the same words you can speak to your own heart. Every time your heart lurches with pain today, say the above words to yourself. Your heart needs to learn how to rebuild a connection to the swimming thoughts in your head, but taking it slow will allow you to build a bridge that remains steady and trustworthy in the strongest of winds. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you for joining me. Grief work is hard enough, and we don't need to navigate it on our own. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you can get a fresh episode of encouragement and education on loss each Sunday. And if you want to support the work outside of leaving a review, consider joining our Patreon. Benefits include a weekly workbook to go along with every single podcast episode, and that alone is incredibly helpful for our grief work. Thank you, as always, to my current patrons. You have my unending gratitude. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week.